Now for our story. It was early evening at Aunt Mary Lane's farm on Willow Road. Aunt Mary and Lefty Larkin, her old friend and helper, had finished a leisurely supper, punctuated by sighs of great satisfaction from Lefty, for Aunt Mary had cooked corned beef hash, an old favorite with Lefty. Then, as Aunt Mary had washed the dishes, Lefty had dried them and put them away in his helter-skelter masculine fashion. Later, when he was safely out of the way in the parlor, building up a great roaring fire which would last all evening, Aunt Mary had gone back to straighten up the cupboard so she could find things for breakfast in the morning. But she wouldn't have let Lefty catch her at this for the world. He imagined himself to be such a great help around the kitchen. Now, Aunt Mary is smoothing a little glycerin and rose water on her hands as she joins Lefty.
What's that nice perfume, Aunt Mary?
Oh, just a little hand lotion. This cold weather makes my hands rough.
Smells nice.
Mm-hmm. I've used it for years. Oh, that's a lovely fire, Lefty.
Thanks.
What are you chuckling about?
I was just remembering when Peggy was in high school. How the kids all used to congregate here and popcorn in the evenings.
Oh, yes. Will you ever forget the toasted marshmallows? Things used to seem sticky for days, no matter how much I cleaned. Those were happy times.
Yes, they were. Well, there goes the 7:15, right on time. Guess I better wind my watch.
How's that watch of yours running, Lefty?
Perfect. Gosh, I don't know what I'd do without this old timepiece. It's almost as much a part of me as my two hands.
I'll never forget the Christmas Peggy gave it to you.
Neither will I. It completely floored me.
Let's see, that was in... Well, I guess she was 13.
Poor kid. She must have saved her allowance for months and months.
Yes. When the youngsters used to stop in for milkshakes and things after school, Peggy would just go in and sit with them so she could save the money.
Ye gods, I didn't know that, Aunt Mary. You shouldn't have let her.
Oh, it didn't hurt her, Lefty. In fact, it was good for her. She was bound and determined to give you a watch. And I thought it would be good for her to make that little sacrifice. It made her gift mean that much more.
Well, it's my most treasured possession, that's for sure. Peggy coming home early tonight?
I don't really know. She called this afternoon late and said she was having dinner with Nicholas.
Was she in a cheerful mood?
Why, yes, I think so. Why do you ask?
Oh, I don't know. Everything seems sort of haywire lately. The marriage.
What's bothering you about it?
It's kind of hard to say. I'll admit I've been for it all along, but now...
Have you changed your mind? Is that it?
No, I haven't changed exactly. But Peggy's attitude is what gets me. She's so lukewarm about the arrangements for the wedding. I know she wants it to be simple, but then...
Lots of girls prefer a simple ceremony.
But even so, for instance, that business about getting a new dress. Gosh, I thought girls always wanted to get dressed up.
Usually, they do.
Yeah, I know. And, well, when I have to put it into words, it doesn't sound very important, I guess. Maybe I'm sort of romantic about the whole thing. I've always dreamt how it would be. Peggy in one of those long, white, filmy-looking affairs with veil and stuff. Say, maybe that sort of thing's gone out of style. Is that it?
Oh, no, Lefty. The traditional bridal dress is still quite the thing, so far as I know. When people want to go in for it.
Oh. Well, I don't know. But there's something about the way Peggy's been acting that worries me. I have an idea she's not happy.
Well, perhaps you're right. But the point is, Peggy thinks she's happy.
Thinks she is? And you think she's not?
Well...
Then I was right.
You see, Lefty, Peggy made up her mind about something. And she's determined to go through with the marriage, regardless of how she feels in her heart.
Oh, you're thinking of Bill Meade again. You still think Peggy's in love with the boy, don't you, Aunt Mary?
I'm afraid I do.
Well, considering that's the way you look at it, I must say you're mighty calm.
Well, Lefty, I'll tell you. I have a funny premonition about this plan Peggy and Nicholas have. I just have a feeling it may not go through. Something may change.
But how can it? If, as you say, Peggy's set on the idea.
Well, I have a feeling Nicholas may break the engagement.
Nicholas? But why? He wants to marry Peggy. He's told me so many times.
No, but you see, Lefty, Nicholas is in love with Peggy.
Well, holy smoke, I should hope so. But that doesn't make sense, Aunt Mary, what you said about his wanting to break it off. Why would he want to do that?
He might want to if he thought Peggy was in love with Bill.
But she isn't.
I'm pretty sure, Lefty, that Nicholas Dorn believes she is.
And at that same moment, the two young people under discussion were driving along the highway toward Wakefield. They had had a very pleasant dinner, and afterward had danced a few times to the music of the cafe's jukebox.
I've had a wonderful time tonight, Nicholas.
I'm glad, Peggy.
With a lovely dinner. You're a very good dancer.
It's nice to see you so happy. I'd say you had spring fever, but I know that it isn't spring.
It's a nice song, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
That's right, too. That's exactly the sort of feeling I have. Lighthearted and sort of excited for no particular reason. The way you are in springtime.
I know the feeling. That is, I remember it dimly from my youth. Peggy, there is a reason why you feel that way tonight.
Is there?
Uh-huh. You've gotten rid of all your bitterness.
Oh. You mean because I talked to Bill?
That's it.
Yes, I guess you're right. I hate not being open and honest with people. It's so much better to get along, be friendly.
Of course it is. I'm proud of you, darling. I only wish I were as sterling a character, as honest.
Why, Nick, you're always honest. You never pretend about things.
Peggy, don't bank on that too much. I might let you down sometime.
Oh, no, Nicholas. You'd never do that. I'm positive. Nicholas,
Yes, darling?
before we started out this evening, when we were at the hotel, you said you had something to tell me. I've felt all evening that there was something on your mind. Why don't you say what it is and get it over with?
Well, I should. Especially since this seems to be the day for putting cards on the table.
Of course you should, Nick. After all, when we're married, we don't want to have secrets from each other. We might as well begin right here and now, telling each other exactly what we think.
When we're married. Oh, Peggy.
Nicholas, what?
Well, Peggy, the thing is, I've been thinking it over and, well...
Nicholas, I've never seen you act like this. Oh, for heaven's sake, say it.
I think we should postpone the wedding.
Postpone it.
Yes, darling. You see, after all, we've kept it pretty quiet. You've only told a few people. It wouldn't hurt to delay it a little while, would it?
No, I suppose not. Nicholas, I don't quite understand. Is it because of Julie?
No, darling, it's certainly not.
Then why?
Because of you, Peggy.
Oh. Well, of course, Nicholas, if you changed your mind, if you don't want to marry me...
Don't say that, Peggy. Don't even think it. You see, darling, it's because I want to too much.
Postpone the wedding. No. Nicholas Dorn was much too honest with himself not to admit that he'd made a compromise he had no right to make. Since he knew very well that Peggy was in love with Bill Meade, he ought to have stepped out of the picture completely and finally. But when it came to saying it, the words just wouldn't come. He loved Peggy too much. And yet, Nicholas knew in his heart he'd merely postponed doing what he eventually must do. Now for our story. Tonight, Bill Meade had stopped for a quick bite in Wakefield and then hurried home to Bungalow B at the Wakefield Auto Court. As he walked through the early darkness of the winter night, Bill was pleasantly conscious of the brand-new briefcase under his arm, filled with paperwork in connection with his new job at David Bowman's bank. Bill was frankly glad to be swamped with work. It filled his evenings, kept him mentally occupied. Otherwise, he went over and over the same well-worn path in his mind. The baby, the divorce, Kit. Peggy. He'd made his position quite clear to Kit. Had told her he intended to get a divorce if she refused to. And that he wanted custody of the baby son he believed to be his own son. There was nothing more he could do. He'd just have to turn the whole matter over to his attorney. Hope that this would have the effect of proving to Kit and Ben Calvert that he meant business. Bill has spread his papers out on a neat little desk he'd bought recently. Turned on his desk lamp and is just preparing to settle down to work when...
Good evening, Bill.
Oh, hello, Mr. Calvert.
Mind if I come in for a while?
Okay.
Well, I see you've made some changes since the last time I was here.
Yeah, I shifted a few things around. Added the bookcase and desk. I've been trying to get hold of a typewriter, but they're pretty scarce articles.
Oh, that's so? Well, I'll have to look into it for you. I might be able to round one up for you.
No, thanks. Don't bother. I can manage all right if I have to.
Oh, don't be like that, Bill. No harm in my helping out if I'm able to, you know.
No, thanks just the same, Mr. Calvert.
You're working hard, I see. Burning the midnight oil. Like your new job?
Sure, I like it fine.
You're handling the farm loans and investments for David Bowman, is that it?
Yeah.
It must be interesting work. And necessary, too. Have to get the wheels going again, you know.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds to me as if that job must be right up your alley.
I think I can handle it.
Of course, David has a lot of nerve, in a way.
I don't follow you. Nerve in what way?
Well, you know how these little communities are. Everybody knows everybody else's business.
Nothing particularly wrong with that, is there?
Oh, no, I suppose not. But it sometimes can be rather disadvantageous in a business way.
You're driving at something, Mr. Calvert. You might as well come out with it. I know you didn't come around to be friendly.
Oh, it's not too important. If David doesn't mind losing a few customers. But people around here are pretty strict about certain things. About marriage, parenthood. It wouldn't go over so well with them to be dealing with the man who abandoned his wife and child.
Oh, I get it now. Look, Mr. Calvert, you don't worry me at all. From what I know of Wakefield people, they're reasonable and they're fair. So if you're trying to hint that I'm to be blackballed for going ahead with a divorce from Kit...
You're still set on going ahead, are you?
Yes, I am. You didn't expect me to change, did you?
Well, you never know. There's always the hope that young people will come to their senses. I'm a lot older than you are, my boy.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Calvert, but I wish you wouldn't try to sound like a benevolent old philosopher or something. Frankly, it doesn't ring true.
You certainly insist on making things difficult, Bill. Of course, I'm willing to grant that occasionally there's a marriage in which two people just aren't suited each other. In which case, there's no percentage in trying to make it work, if you're sure it won't. But the point I'm making is this, Bill. Nothing's to be gained by vindictiveness, trying to hurt each other.
Well, I'll go along with you on that. But if you're referring to Kit and me, I don't see how you
Kit's awfully upset, Bill.
Well, sure. So am I if it comes to that. Nevertheless,
And I think she's done her very best to see things your way.
You do? You really think that?
Certainly I do. But for you to come out and demand custody of the child on top of everything else she's gone through... Oh, Bill, that's just too much. Surely you're not serious about that, are you, though? You were...
You're wrong, Mr. Calvert. I'm very serious about wanting that child.
But that's the craziest thing I ever heard of. How in thunder do you think you'd take care of a baby that age, in this hole
Now,
here?
wait a minute, Mr. Calvert. If you can't discuss this thing calmly, we'd better deal through our attorneys.
Look here, Bill. Let's be sensible.
Fine. Let's, by all means.
You've been talking about what you want, making all those demands. You haven't been willing to accept anything we've proposed up to now.
No. No, because none of the various suggestions you and Kit have made were worth a hoot. To me.
All right, then. How about this? After all, what you're after is a divorce, am I right?
Yes, I want a divorce.
Now, look.
But...
Kit and I have talked the whole thing over, Bill. So far, her main interest, naturally, was trying to make a go of the marriage, hating to see it fail. But we have to be realistic. If it has failed, beyond hope, then we all might as well face it. Kit's willing to accept that now. She's willing to go away, get a quiet divorce somewhere, without a lot of fuss. Can all be taken care of smoothly and easily.
Well, that sounds fine so far. What's the catch?
Oh, why do you have to be so suspicious, Bill? There's no catch. You want your freedom, don't you?
Well, if you mean by that I want to get out of a marriage which was a mistake from the beginning, yes, I do.
Then that's all there is to it. This way we don't have to go through a lot of trouble in court, gossip, airing our soiled linen in public, so to speak.
Well, that would be a lot better. But I don't understand this change. I told Kit long ago I'd rather do it that way, and she gave me a definite no. Gosh, I've never wanted to make this thing any worse than it had to be.
No, of course you haven't. Well, then, let's consider that an agreement. Kit will give you a divorce, you'll be free again, and we'll all consider ourselves wiser by so much experience. What do you say?
Well, there's just one thing we haven't taken care of.
What's that, Bill? I thought
It's very peculiar, but you haven't mentioned anything about the baby in all this friendly little setup. Now, what happens to the child?
Well, of course, Bill, it's perfectly natural that Kit would want to keep the child. Mother's feelings, you know.
A mother's feelings, yeah. So that's it. You've got this whole scheme cooked up so that I'll give up without a murmur and let you keep the baby.
But you can't really be serious with that crazy idea of yours. You can't actually mean you'd attempt to take that child away from his mother.
Why not?
Well, it's preposterous. Even aside from everything else, you, a single man with that infant. What do you know about children?
A lot more than you think. I know how important it is for my child to have decent ideals, to be taught tolerance, taught to have a feeling of responsibility toward the world he's going to live in.
And what makes you think you'd be a better teacher than Kit? Than his own mother?
Mr. Calvert, I think we're just wasting each other's time.
I wouldn't say that. Look, Bill, you can't have everything. If Kit's willing to make a compromise, you should be able to.
You mean you want me to say that I won't attempt to get custody of my son?
I mean you should do the sensible thing, Bill. Think it over. I don't expect you to make a decision now. But remember, freedom is a pretty important thing at your age.
Sure, I know that.
After all, a baby would be a terrific responsibility. You know that as well as I do. Taking a young child like that away from his mother, it's pretty risky business, Bill. Well, head for home now. You take your time. I'm pretty sure you'll decide sensibly for all concerned.
Good night, Mr. Calvert.
Remember, Bill, you're only young once.
After Ben had left, Bill reviewed his father-in-law's amazing performance, his hypocritical attempt to be friendly, understanding. Bill realized that, in a sense, Ben had offered him a bribe this evening. A quiet, uncontested divorce, his freedom, or the custody of his baby son. Thinking it over soberly, Bill realized it was a hard choice to make. For if he went ahead, there was always the possibility that he might not win custody of his son after all. And on the other side, to be free was very tempting. There was the possibility that he might somehow rebuild his life, might even recapture the love he'd once had with Peggy Douglas. Now for our story.
Lefty, I have a funny premonition about this plan Peggy and Nicholas have. I just have a feeling it may not go through. Something may change.
But how can it? If, as you say, Peggy's set on the idea.
I have a feeling Nicholas may break the engagement.
Nicholas? But why? He wants to marry Peggy. He's told me so many times.
But you see, Lefty, Nicholas is in love with Peggy.
Now Nicholas Dorn, the young writer, and Peggy Douglas, Aunt Mary's niece, are driving along the highway on their way back to Wakefield after a pleasant evening of dinner and dancing. Peggy'd talked to Bill Meade that afternoon, had explained that she had no bitterness toward him now, and that she wanted to be his friend. There was no possibility of their going back to what they'd once had. But she believed they might each find some happiness, perhaps a different sort, in going ahead, building new lives. That's what she was going to do, Peggy had told Bill. She was going to marry Nicholas Doran. Peggy had a bad moment when she saw Bill walking away from her. Had the impulse to call him back. But by the time she arrived at the hotel to meet Nicholas, that moment was forgotten. She was simply happy that she'd straightened things out. Perhaps it was because she herself was so cheerful this evening that Peggy had been all the more aware of Nick's mood of anxiety, nervousness. She felt he was holding something back, something he wanted to tell her. Finally, Nicholas had come out with it.
Peggy, I think we should postpone the wedding.
Postpone it?
Yes, darling. You see, after all, we've kept it pretty quiet. You've only told a few people. It wouldn't hurt to delay it a little while, would it?
No, I suppose not, but I don't quite understand. Is it because of Julie?
No, darling. It's certainly not.
Then why?
Because of you, Peggy.
Oh. Well, of course, Nicholas, if you've changed your mind. If you don't want to marry me.
Don't say that, Peggy. Don't even think it. You see, darling, it's because I want to too much.
But, Nicholas, I don't understand. If you want
Peggy,
to...
haven't you ever wanted to do something very much and yet known down deep that it wasn't the right thing to do?
Well, of course, but I don't see how that applies to us. Unless you've changed your mind about all the things we've been saying for months.
Well, I suppose in a way I have changed. Matter of fact, I know I have.
But how? You mean you don't think our kind of marriage would work?
Oh, it isn't that. Might under some circumstances. A different setup.
I see. But you don't think our setup is the right one?
I don't anymore. At least, Peggy, I think we should wait and see.
Wait and see what? What do you expect is going to change?
You might.
Well, it's funny you don't seem to think I know my own feelings. You're as bad as Aunt Mary and Jane. They both keep telling me how they think I feel. Now you, too.
Now, wait a minute, darling. Get your feathers all ruffled. Your Aunt Mary knows you pretty well. She's a very smart woman.
Oh. Did Aunt Mary have anything to do with your wanting to postpone the wedding?
Yes, she did.
I see.
Then there were a lot of other things.
A lot of things? Aren't you being a little vague, Nick?
Well, it's hard for me to be articulate, Peggy, to put it into words. Because, you see, I don't want it this way, and yet I know it's the only thing to do.
Now I am lost.
Well, what it comes down to is the more I've thought about it, the more I feel it's a good idea to wait until this Bill Meade thing is settled.
But it is settled already. Finally and completely. I told you what happened this afternoon when I saw Bill.
I know, Peggy. I know what you told me. But you see, Bill's life isn't settled yet. He and this Kit still have to get their affairs untangled, the divorce and so on. All that might make a difference.
But I've told you over and over that part of it doesn't concern me.
Perhaps it doesn't, darling. It may work out all right, and then I kick myself around the block for making all this fuss. But now I feel... Peggy, won't you take my judgment this once?
All right, Nicholas. After all, if you want to postpone the wedding, there's nothing much I can do but agree. Sort of funny, though. You're being reluctant. After all the things you used to say to convince me in the first place.
I'll admit it must seem very strange to you. But things don't always turn out as you expect. Peggy, you're not angry with me, I hope.
No, Nicholas. I'm not angry with you. Only, I wish... Nicholas,
What's the matter, darling?
Nick, I'm scared.
Scared of what?
Oh, I don't know. I just...
You feel better with your bridges safely burned? Don't trust yourself? The way you feel about Bill Meade? Darling, don't you see? That proves what I've tried to say. Don't be scared, Peggy. Everything's going to be all right.
Later, as Peggy opens the front door at Aunt Mary's.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, dear.
Hello, Peggy.
Did you have a nice time?
I guess so.
Well, you don't sound very enthusiastic.
Oh, it was all right.
Oh, Peggy, before I forget, did you stop in at the dressmaker's?
No, I didn't, Aunt Mary.
Oh, but Peggy, she won't have much time.
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. But, dear, she'll have to give you another fitting before.
There's plenty of time, Aunt Mary. In fact, I won't need a new dress after all.
Well, what do you mean, Peggy? What's going on?
The wedding's postponed. Nicholas and I have decided to wait a while.
You've decided to... What are you talking about, Peggy?
We've changed our minds, Lefty. Aunt Mary,
Yes, dear.
I thought you'd be glad. After all our talks, I thought you'd think we were being sensible.
Well, dear, I confess I'm relieved in a way. I felt from the beginning it would be best for you to think it over very carefully. Wait until everything's cleared up.
Yes, I know. Of course, that might mean an awfully long wait. Until everything's cleared up, as you say.
Not necessarily, dear. In any event, it never hurts to be sensible. Not rush ahead. I'm really very happy about your decision.
You are? Then I guess I ought to be honest with you. The decision wasn't mine, Aunt Mary. It was Nick's idea.
Nick's? Well, I'll be darned. I just can't believe it.
I know. Of course, it would seem strange to you, Lefty. But it was entirely his idea. I'm sort of tired. I think I'll go up and change.
Why don't you slip on a robe and come down for a minute? I'll make a pot of chocolate.
All right, Aunt Mary. That'd be nice. I need something.
Well, Aunt Mary, you're right again. I don't know how you do it. You call the play every time while I'm still going around in a thick fog.
Well, Lefty, maybe it's because I'm a woman. I can tell quite a bit about how a person's going to behave just by knowing his character. By and large, people are pretty consistent.
I still don't get it. I would have sworn Nicholas was dying to marry Peggy. And then he puts it off. If Peggy had done it, it might make a little more sense to me.
Don't you see, Lefty? Nicholas Dorn is deeply in love with Peggy.
Of course he is. That's why I...
No, Lefty. Nicholas is a very fine, sensitive boy. He wants above everything for Peggy to be happy. And he's evidently decided from that standpoint that it's better to wait. Let time tell the story.
Well, I guess you're right, Aunt Mary, but somehow it worries me. I wish I knew what kind of a story it'll be.
Lefty Larkin looked at Aunt Mary's serene face. And again, as he had hundreds of times in the past 15 years since he came to the Lane farm, he thanked his lucky stars that the young girl he knew to be his own daughter was under Aunt Mary's care, her wise and protective guidance. Still, he couldn't fight back a worried, uneasy feeling. He'd wanted so much to see Peggy happily married, safe.